You're listening to the Uncensored Direct Marketing Show. This show is designed for direct response marketers who want raw, unfiltered conversion tips and secrets to scale their offers profitably to reach their next million. I'm Maria Sparagas. I'm the founder of DirectPayNet and your host. Now let's dive in. Hey, everybody, this is Maria, and we're on another episode of Uncensored Direct Marketing. Today, I have a very special guest, my friend, my pal, my ex-colleague, or somebody that I worked with in the past. His name is Malcolm McKinnons, and he is the expert in everything that has to do with fulfillment and just about everything in online business. Malcolm knows a little bit about everything and can pretty much guide you to success in any part of your online business. So I met Malcolm. When did we meet? Maybe like what, 7, 8, I don't know, 10. Fuck,
that sounds about right.
Yeah, we've known each other for a really long time, and we met through a mutual client and just connected, became friends. And I obviously think that Malcolm, you're a really smart guy and you know what's up. So I wanted to have you on my show, and a lot of merchants are going to be very interested in hearing about this. Anybody who's selling supplements or any product that needs some kind of fulfillment is going to get a ton of value from this episode because Malcolm knows everything about fulfillment. So Malcolm, I hope I did you justice with my intro, but I will let you talk a little bit about your experience and what you've done and how you know so much about fulfillment specifically, but also how you know about online business.
Wow, I'm looking over my shoulder to see if I've got some sort of cape or something, because that was quite an intro. It was
super Malcolm.
I only hope to live up to that. All right, my fulfillment experience started. I'm going to really date myself. In the 90s, I ended up being a business analyst for a building materials distribution company. And I ended up starting up a distribution company as well, and ended up doing a bunch of turnarounds. So these things were, businesses were sort of the order of magnitude of about 500 million Canadian. That's about how big the companies that I was working with were. The later ones that we ended up turning around ended up growing to about $1 billion. So I've seen it. We bought companies, we integrated companies, we did all kinds of crazy technical integrations, all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is that it's a place to bring in stuff. It's a place to sort stuff. It's a place to package stuff. It's a place to ship stuff at a very, very, very high level. That's what it is. But there's a whole slew of nuances, as you've alluded to. So that's where I got my start in distribution. And then in the online supplements business, I had the good fortune to stumble into a project for, it was an IT project for someone who was well regarded in the online marketing space, direct online marketing. And so I was working on a project with him. It was kind of funny because I actually recommended that he stop the project and turf me. At the same time, he was sort of shocked at this. And so then he put me in as a project manager for rolling out his supplements. And I maintained that for sort of 3, 4, 5 years. And I think that's where I learned how much I didn't know about processing. And you were very kind. You took me under your wing and, sort of guided me in a variety of different ways and gave me just enough to be dangerous, sort of that just enough knowledge to be dangerous in a variety of different circumstances. So thank you for that. And I will long remember you. For those of you that are listening, if you don't know about Maria's expertise in processing, she has forgotten more than the vast majority anyone will ever know about processing. So,
come on! Now you're shamelessly you're plugging me. I'll send you your payment later. We can get we can get started.
We've been in the affiliate space, right? So no. Yeah, in all seriousness, she knows her stuff, and she's very generous with her time. She taught me a bunch. So thank you, Maria.
You're welcome. And there's one important thing here is that fulfillment and processing goes hand in hand. So that's a great lead-in, right? Into our conversation is that people think, fulfillment and the billing department or the payment processing department are two very, they shouldn't talk to each other. But actually, if something happens to one, the other should know, and vice versa. So, great lead-in. And I know you have a nice opening remark about something that we spoke about last week. So I'll let this is going to resonate, I think, with the audience. So I'll let you go ahead and say it.
Well, when I first started in the online direct marketing space, there was, someone told me a quote, and I never actually have validated the quote, but I'm going to say, hey, this is apparently Dan Kennedy said that the sales window doesn't close until the refund window closes. So the sale's not done until the refund window closes. And you could say the same thing for chargebacks.
Yeah.
Right. So basically you have a commitment to that customer until you don't. And that sale is extended for that period of time. And that includes fulfillment. And that's part of why we have that.
Yeah,
so it's a good way to live. It's a good way to think about fulfillment. And there's a second aspect or a second way to think about fulfillment in the online direct marketing space. It's kind of like the equivalent of the shelf in a retail store. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on today.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the digital world and the physical world. Like, a lot of people are going from, digital, from physical to digital now and so forth, and they're having a hard time. But that's a perfect example and lead in is that, it's a virtual shelf. Well, it's a physical shelf, but it's one that you don't see. The customer doesn't see, but it's the same premise. So talking about, just, a lot of merchants that, since COVID have increased their output and maybe have gone from selling a lot physical to now selling online and so forth. How would you, like, if you're brought into a project, how would you select a fulfillment house for a merchant? Let's talk about a high level, somebody who's doing 6 figures a month, or somebody who's aspiring to get there quite quickly. How would you choose a fulfillment house? There's so many out there. Sometimes I feel like a lot of them are just different names going to the same place, but I mean, you know best. So give us like top 3-4 things that you would look for.
Right. Probably the number one would be experience in the domain. The hardest thing about fulfillment is anticipating the problems and knowing how to deal with them, because they are going to happen. And once you understand all of the little things that can happen, then your ability to deal with those things in a smooth fashion so that it doesn't affect your chargeback or something like that. So number one would probably be experience. Mm-hmm. The second is I'm a big fan of integration. So we talked about how the processing department needs to know what the fulfillment department's doing. The reality is that these businesses are systems. And so having a fulfillment provider that can respond efficiently and understands discovery throughout the rest of your enterprise, that makes it useful. So for example, let's say that you're using a particular CRM. If they already integrate with that CRM, that's going to save you a heck of a lot of challenge. And you can depend on that integration to help you solve those challenges when they come up. And there's a variety of things that you should do. So the second thing would be ease with which that fulfillment provider can integrate with the rest of your systems. Cost is always going to be a consideration, but scale is another piece. So a really good fulfillment house for a small group might not fare very well for a very large group. And so walking through with your fulfillment provider all of the products and all the combinations to hear how they're going to handle each one of those to get that out to your customers, that's probably the single best thing that you can do. So go through the thought experiment, think about all the things that you think they're going to need to do, ask them how they do it, ask them about quality checks, ask them about all those things, and then ask them about volume. The right fulfillment provider for someone who's doing 10 initials a day is not necessarily going to be the same one for someone who's doing 10,000 initials a day.
And how easy, just talking about that, like, let's say I'm starting out, I'm doing, that 10 sales a day. I choose a fulfillment house. How easy is it to switch? Is that like an easy thing, or should you plan, like how far ahead should you plan, to be able to fulfill? Because like you said, you're starting out, you have 10 sales a day. This is a good fulfillment house, but then you're doing 500 sales a day. That's not the same partner maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. The larger guys in the industry already have relationships for their given brands with 4 or 5 different fulfillment providers and 4 or 5 different manufacturers, if they're not doing it internally. There's also a decision that you have to make between internal, doing all of the fulfillment yourself. The apocryphal story of the guy in the garage, putting the labels on the own bottle. I don't recommend that unless you've had experience doing it, but it is an option. But is it easy to switch? Changes are never necessarily super easy or super hard, but there are ways to do it that make it simpler. So for example, with one client, I actually ended up with a phone call at 5 a.m. saying that the fulfillment provider was not going to accept a 500,000 bottle order landed. Even though I'd talked to them in advance and said, hey, this is coming, you're good. Yes. So I get the phone call and it's like, what? You promised me that you would accept this, right? So being able to make makeshift adjustments to facilitate something like that on the fly is where you're going to get into some challenges. So having a backup fulfillment provider would be one way to handle that particular issue. As it happened, we ended up doing renting some containers and stuffing the stock in there and adjusting their process. That's what we ended up doing for that particular instance. But it wasn't a fun time.
Okay. Well, I mean, having a backup merchant account, having a backup fulfillment, having a backup advertising source, it all comes down to backup. So that's a interesting point. I mean, a lot of people just figure, well, I have one merchant account, I'm not doing anything black hat. I'm just having, one product, and then one fulfillment, but all these different processes, they all come with a certain risk, like somebody who goes out of business, somebody who has downtime, technical, something, these things happen. So, lesson learned here is for everybody who's doing anything in the direct response space specifically is you need backups to everything. You got one merchant account, you got to get another, you got one fulfillment, you got to get another, and so on and so forth. So specifically on the fulfillment house, I know we spoke about this, randomly. What would you look for in the fulfillment house? Like, how should it look? How should it feel? Like, should you go look at visit it, like, or
Absolutely.
Virtual tour? What do you suggest?
So my preference, we're in a COVID time, so it's a little bit trickier now, but I would absolutely recommend you walk your warehouse. There's a whole slew of different things that you can identify when you're walking a warehouse. I've walked more than my fair share. I've been doing it for, 30 years. High-level thing
Malcolm, you're not like 65 here, 30 years. Come on. You're a young lad, 30 years.
Well, I've actually been, I don't know if I told you this. My first job was one of my first jobs was in a warehouse with a very large furniture retailer that speaks a lot of Swedish.
Okay.
So just to
you ate a lot of meatballs.
Yeah, they were very cost effective. So I've actually been working in warehouses for an extended period of time, and or working in or with warehouses. There's nothing quite like a visit. Take a look at the flow. You want to see something. This is common in COVID, where what you want is one flow of people through. You actually want that for your product flowing through the warehouse as well. If you see anything with you see a path where it comes in one door and goes out the same door, that's usually an indication that it's probably not an awesome fulfillment provider. Want to know why? Because if it comes in one door, it's easiest to just plonk that product right in front of your old product. So your old product gets hidden. And this comes to the second trick. When you walk that warehouse, drag your finger along the product in the back corner, the sides. If it up with a whole bunch of dust, that means it's been there a long time. And if it's been there a long time, it means that they're probably not using first in, first out strategies. So a really good strategy is to walk the warehouse and just drag your finger along the less traveled product, especially if you see some of that in the staging area. If you see that same product out getting shipped, then that's probably going to be stock that's going to go off and you're going to end up with a problem. You're probably going to have to chuck it out. I think one of the things that we talked about last week was, as a consumer, it's really disturbing to see something with a best before date of even within 3 months. Well, part of what you have to do is you have to look at the process inside the warehouse to see how it prevents that. And the easiest thing to do is to just go wipe your finger along the backstop. So
not very technical, but it works.
it's simple, but it's remarkably effective. You also want to see a quality check. So you want to see how they're actually loading up your product, and then you want to see who checks to see what gets stuffed inside that envelope. So, coming back to that analogy of the experience, anything that would cause a customer to put that product back on the shelf if they were in a physical retail store, you want to look for opportunities for that to happen through your fulfillment provider, because you're going to have the exact same impact. So if they're manhandling the bottles and you've got a thin IFC on yours, it's probably not going to travel well. So an IFC is a box that's a retail box that sits around your bottle. So it's probably best to put that in a box as opposed to inside the classic bubble envelope, because it gets bent. And just think about yourself. If you're in a retail store, are you going to take the one with the bent side, You're probably not.
Yeah.
So if you receive it with bent, the idea of that being a premium product is tricky. So that's another trick. So making sure they're shipping out the right number. So this comes to chargeback fighting. A good strategy is to actually weigh the envelope as it goes out. The reason why is that most supplement bottles are approximately the same weight, not all, but most of them. And it's typically very different from the bubble pack or from the box. So if you actually, because they require the weight to go on the bill of lading or the transit documents that go out with it, you can actually check to see whether or not they shipped the right number of bottles. And if you have this person coming back with, hey, I ordered 6 and I only got 1, well, you can actually pull up the BOL. Oh, it kind of looks like you might have got 6. Now we can have a discussion about how to handle something like that, from a policy standpoint. But at least it lets you know whether or not you should blacklist them in the CRM if that ends up being the decision that you take with that particular customer.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's definitely important. And obviously, if you can't go in physically, then you can do a virtual tour or something. But the lesson that I'm getting here is you got to see how this fulfillment center is laid out, how things are going. Obviously, the finger is a physical thing, but maybe you could ask the guy that's holding the camera, giving you the virtual tour to do that. But, obviously, depending on what your size is and so forth, once you start scaling, this is an important thing. And you did, you touched upon like nightmare scenarios or bad scenarios. And the interesting thing is, when I go to a store, it's the same thing. Like you said, if I see a bottle or in a box and it's just a little crunkled or something, and everybody has this habit, they just take the one in the back because they don't want the one that's like manhandled a little bit too much or that looks used or whatever. So I mean, it's the same thing when you're fulfilling a product, and that's it's important, every little aspect. You were saying to me when we had a discussion last week, Malcolm and I, by the way, we, for our audience, we talk often, and we were just shooting the shit last week, and he mentioned to me about a merchant who something about cigarette smoke and returns and so forth. So I'll let you say the story, but just this is for the audience, is that little things can impact chargebacks and your revenue and all that. So tell us about this anecdotal nightmare story.
Okay, so we were seeing a slightly higher rate of refunds. And when we traced back, we noticed that it was shipments that went out on Friday after 2, I think it was, had the challenge. And we're like, why is it we have a ginormous return rate only on bottles shipped Friday after 2? Is there something wrong with, the sorter, or is there, long story short, we ended up drilling down to find out that in the area where the product was being packaged, there was someone that was smoking. And of course, it's a health supplement. So you can just imagine your customer opens up this bubble envelope, and all of a sudden there's this stale cigarette smoke that hits them in the face. It's not going to create the type of brand image that you want. That's the other reason why. Hey, walking, surprise inspections, all that kind of stuff, these are great for fulfillment. Or even just, hey, can you just give me a virtual tour? Ask the warehouse manager, just grab their phone and just walk you through it.
Yeah.
Go see this product, go see that product, and take a note of some of the things that you see. So that was the story we talked about last week.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that's exactly it. And a lot of merchants in the supplement space, they're selling skin creams and stuff like that. And smell is such an important part of you getting your package, right? Sometimes I get these like drop ship stuff that I order from China, and I open, I'm like, oh, it doesn't make me want to use it. But obviously, if I'm paying $2 for something, that's one thing. If I'm paying $70, $80 for a cream or something especially if something I'm going to ingest and it stinks, well, I don't want it. So there Absolutely. You go. This is directly related to chargebacks and refunds and, problems that you can have with your merchant account because of something that you don't know. And that takes us to testing your fulfillment. I mean, the simplest thing you can do, and I tell this to merchants all the time, is test your fulfillment. Just have people from various parts, like a couple of people, one in Florida, one in New York, one in, just different parts of the country, just order your product and document, when did you order? When did you receive it? Like all that stuff. And, that's a lesson learned from the great Malcolm here, is test. And I test everything though. I test like everything in every part of my life. When I do something, I always test it to make sure it's the correct thing. So that's the way I live. But, talking about testing, like, what do you like? Do you have like something that you like a test document, or how do you suggest people test to make sure that things are going well?
Fulfillment, probably the best way is just to have a regular subscription package and then periodically drop in a few orders. You don't want people recognizing the credit card. You don't want the fulfillment provider necessarily recognizing the name or the address or something like that. So, because they will do that. It's natural to go ahead and do. But have a regular process whereby you introduce a new name, a new place, a new address, a new credit card, and drop it to a different spot and actually experience it. See how long it takes. What you said. Open it up. See what the product's like. The IFC is bent. Is anything pulled back? I remember we're dealing with one client where the fulfillment provider was, because they were doing it was an off-the-shelf product. That fulfillment provider was actually shipping out half-filled bottles. Oh, so the only way you're going to discover that, because the indication that you could have was the weight. But the other side of it is that if people are receiving half the product that they're paying for, then you know that they're going to charge back. And that was actually an issue with one of my clients. So how did we discover that? Well, guess what? It was the mystery shopping. Just the same way that they do in major retail, where they send mystery shoppers in to go test the experience and the conversations and all that kind of stuff. Exactly the same thing with your fulfillment provider.
That's awesome. That's a great lesson, testing and testing in all your markets too. So if your fulfillment house is in the US and you're selling to Canada, don't just take it for granted that people in Canada are going to receive it. There's lists of ingredients, and Malcolm, you're the expert at this in terms of like checking, is this even allowed to be? Sometimes it's benign stuff. Like I had a merchant who was having a huge amount of chargebacks. And we were like, what the hell? I mean, the guy's selling and the funnel's pretty clean. Everything's good. And the guy was basically selling a product to Australia. He was British, selling to Australia. And there was just like one flour of some sort, something really benign that we didn't even realize, but that specific variation or the name of it was getting it stopped at customs, and the packages were never going through. And obviously my job was, okay, well, where are these chargebacks coming from? I'm like, Australia. Okay, well, obviously there's something wrong with Australia. And then it was just, there was an ingredient that was getting it stopped at the border. And then once we fixed that, all the chargebacks were gone. And, sometimes it's like, oh, well, only 5% of my sales are coming from Australia. Yeah, but that could be 5% chargebacks. Like if it doesn't get to where it needs to go, right? So absolutely. And I think your point here is that slicing and dicing and understanding, every angle through which those chargebacks can come, so that you get visibility into where the consistency is. Australia is another challenging spot for domestic merchants, U.S. merchants, because it can very frequently take a long time. And the time that it takes for the customer to receive the product, there are a few tricks that you can use from a fulfillment standpoint to try and get it there faster. And it's not just, hey, go FedEx or go UPS and get a courier charge that's enormous. There are other strategies that you can use. Sometimes that'll make sense for your very large products. So let's say, for example, you offer a 6 or a 12. It sometimes can actually be cost effective or make more economic sense to FedEx those, because the likelihood of chargeback if you FedEx them is significantly reduced, and you want to keep that customer happy. So it's a demonstration of customer happiness. So FedEx, because obviously it goes faster and you get like the proof of delivery, or maybe you're saying like in the US you don't have tracked shipping, but then international you offer tracked shipping. Is that?
Yep. Absolutely. You can absolutely end up with that. The track shipping can make a big difference on your chargebacks, the winning, not necessarily the earning. But sometimes customers will actually get a sense that if they're getting something through FedEx, that they feel more special and therefore will be more reluctant to charge back. I've seen that before.
Hey, but you know what? That's dealing funny. No, I was going to say that's funny, because I get the same thing. When I see FedEx, I open the door, but when I see Canada Post, I don't open the door.
There you go. I don't know why, but yeah, it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon. So for your really big customers, the whales, the ones that you really want to keep, treat them really well. Put them on a special shipping strategy.
And then, talking about, chargebacks, it's my favorite topic. I have to keep talking about it, but chargeback mitigation, refunds, and so forth. I know that I didn't really follow. So I want you to clarify for me, when do you ship products? When do you wait a day? Because we get all kinds of merchants like that write different stuff on their apps. It's like immediate shipping or wait 2 days or it takes 5 days. Or how do you figure all that stuff out? The delays of when to ship, how to ship, and how long it should take? What's the sweet spot?
You're going to hate my answer. It depends, right? Traditional consulting answer. It depends on so in your system, if you're trying to reduce chargebacks, the shorter time to get the fulfillment provider to ship it out, that's your best strategy. Because a whole bunch of people refund within the first 24 hours, if you want to save money and lower your inventory pressure, then you can add a 24-hour window from when the order gets taken to when it gets pushed over to fulfillment. And the reason for that is that if your customer service team gets the call and can cancel it, they can void it prior to shipment. And guess what? That stock hasn't gone out and you've saved that money. You haven't paid the postage, you haven't paid the inventory costs, all of those other kinds of things just haven't been paid. So it depends on what you're trying to optimize for. But rule of thumb in the industry, if you're aggressive and you want to, and your big goal is to prevent chargebacks, shortest window possible.
Okay.
It is the most expensive from the rest of the function standpoint, but yeah. Oh, I guess they're coming again.
Oh, somebody's coming for you, Malcolm. All those shipping tricks, fulfillment tricks. But yeah, that's interesting. The fact that that most refunds occur. So I guess you send the confirmation, I guess, to the customer by email saying, "Hey, you ordered this," and they get this like buyer's remorse or whatever, or maybe they see it on their credit card statement online, and then you're saying that most refunds happen in 24 hours. So that's why.
I mean, it varies based on the funnel, but if you create that 24-hour window, yeah, you're capturing a bunch. What you really want to do is you want to take a look at, the buyer's remorse refunds, take a look at those early stage refunds. It's going to be a trade-off because if you have it 3 days, then you'll get all of those refunds, but you're going to increase your likelihood of chargeback because people are going to be, where's my stuff? Where's my stuff? Where's my stuff? And it's a false economy as well, because the longer it takes, especially folks in the US, the longer it takes for something to ship out, the longer the more frequently you're going to have people phoning in your customer service and saying, where's my stuff? Where's my stuff? Where's my stuff?
Yeah. And you definitely don't want somebody to get their credit card statement or like their month-end credit card statement and not receive their product. That's, people don't like paying for stuff they haven't gotten. So lesson learned is, I guess maybe a good rule of thumb is when you're starting is to, if you, depending on how aggressive your offer is to wait the 24 hours, because that seems kind of low risk. Would that be your, let's say you're starting out with a merchant, would you say that would be your starting point is to wait the 24 hours, or should people just right away start with the being aggressive and shipping immediately?
I'm a big fan of just doing a quick look. If you can see that you're going to have a lot of opportunities for people to have buyer's remorse, then creating that window is probably sensible because it's going to save you in the long run. 24 hours, I've never seen cause a significant increase in chargebacks. Rule of thumb is 3 days. That's, if you take 3 days to ship, you're probably starting to hit chargeback territory for US products. International have altered expectations about when things are going to arrive. And so you have a little more flexibility with them as long as you communicate. But one good thing to do is don't just give them an order confirmation, give them a shipment confirmation. So some CRMs will support this. Send an email that gives them an update. So imagine it like when you order something from Amazon and then you get that update that says, congratulations, thanks for your order, da, 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 da. And then you get nothing. You sort of feel at sea because Amazon's setting the new bar for what's required in e-commerce. So because they send that, it probably makes sense that customers will expect any e-commerce merchant to send out that type of update. So find a way to send that email out. Keep in touch with the customer, keep them informed, let them know that things are on their way because that's what's going to motivate them to not refund.
all the simple old school customer service stuff, just letting people know, right? So yeah,
Absolutely.
send your email order confirmation, and a couple of days later, or when it ships, hey, here's your tracking, if you offer tracking, whatever, and just let people know. And if they know, then they don't bother calling you, they don't charge back, they don't do all that stuff. So that's interesting. You touched upon the technology thing, and I know you're a busy guy, so I don't want to destroy you in terms of time. So I just want to get to a couple of questions left, because I'm so curious about this. It has so many implications with what I do specifically, like with merchant accounts, and it's like people don't realize it, and I just feel like I need to drive that point home. But technology implications, testing that, like how would you test that? Or what are the features? I guess the better question is, what are the features in your CRM that you need to have to say that this is a good integration with the fulfillment house? Like, let's say you're using CRM 1, fulfillment house ABC. What do you look for? Like, is let's say a showstopper if they don't have shipping confirmation capabilities? Like, give me like 3 top things that would be like, okay, this is not a good integration.
So in terms of the CRM and the fulfillment provider, it's sort of a blend. The first and most basic level is you don't want to have to do an export and ship something over. There's a lot of systems that will actually require that, especially if you're scaling, that's going to kill you. So don't do that, right? Look for an integration that says, hey, we're going to batch send these over without having anyone get involved. So that's one piece. The second piece is I would say that notification of shipping, so getting that shipping confirmation information back into the CRM is huge. And the reason it's huge is because, one, there's a whole bunch of statistical work that you can do with the time that actually gets pumped back in. But the second piece is that if your customer service team is talking with the customer and they're dealing with, where's my stuff? If they have to go into 3 or 4 different systems, that becomes harder. That integration back in, especially if you scale and you end up having multiple fulfillment providers, you want to have one screen for that customer service team to be able to look at. That's the fulfillment provider providing information to the rest of your system, the thing we talked about at the beginning of this.
Yeah.
That's really important. It's trying to make everybody in the system able to do things easily. So last but not least, there are some fulfillment providers, there's some CRM systems that try to do inventory, and that's really tricky. Because the theory of inventory that, hey, the only thing that gets lost is the product that gets shipped out. The reality is that there is slippage. You have to understand it. You have to manage it. So you're going to have to actually take account of your inventory and take a look at what's there. Don't take it as a fait accompli that what your CRM system, just because it's deducted those bottles from inventory, that's exactly what you have on the ground. Because what if there was a leak? What if the water comes in, seeps in, that bottom stock just happens to be, fit? I mean, we're talking about Hurricane Alley for a whole bunch of these fulfillment providers in Florida. The reality is that the water can lift up and wipe out a bunch of your product. So these are considerations that you want to have, and you want to build processes to make sure that you don't get caught out making promises and then getting stuck with no inventory. So that's what I would recommend.
Inventory management is huge post-COVID. I mean, I know a lot of merchants that were doing different things and then, selling 50 bottles a day or whatever. And then all of a sudden COVID hit and, that went to 200 a day. So inventory management is huge in setting people's expectations. And sometimes it's good to pull back maybe on your advertising and kind of rejig all this stuff and then go back and, you don't want to get caught like, high chargebacks, match listed, or it's like problems with your processing because you didn't manage it properly. But, like you said, in Florida or different areas, and if you're going to get different fulfillment houses, you might as well get them like kind of peppered around the country, I guess. Is that a good practice?
Sometimes. Again, it depends on what you're trying to optimize. So there's a very large player in the space who benefited tremendously from having their manufacturer and the fulfillment provider and the customer service team all being incredibly close to one another. And there are some economic advantages to having your manufacturing and your fulfillment provider being close or even one and the same. There are some disadvantages too. So knowing exactly what it is that you want to do or where it is that you should place really depends on who your customers are, because you want the time that it takes, for the product that comes out of your warehouse to deliver efficiently. So if you have your fulfillment provider, let's say, for example, in Florida, today you'll pay probably an extra day or two to ship that product to California. So a fulfillment provider that, let's say, for example, has something to service the East Coast and something to service either the Midwest or West, let's say, for example, a California or Utah-based, planning that network really depends on where you get your customers from. Because I know that there's a huge number of folks right now eschewing customers from California based on some recent legislation.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing now is that you said, having your manufacturing and fulfillment one next to the other, and there could be disadvantages. Like, I wouldn't see that as a disadvantage. Like, wouldn't that be actually better if you're manufacturing your product and then next door is your fulfillment? You can, kind of pop it over and it'll be faster. What would be the disadvantage to that?
If there's a hurricane that takes out both your manufacturing and your fulfillment, you are completely screwed and you have no options.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Right?
We always forget about natural disasters, even though we live them all the time.
Well, it's funny. They're going to become more frequent. We can see that the frequency of hurricanes is going up. And then coupled with that, if you have infectious diseases like COVID, the likelihood of your manufacturing getting shut down at the same time as your fulfillment increases if they happen to both be in a high area wow. of high COVID or whatever. So these are the types of things that we're going to be thinking about more and more as we plan our networks.
Man, there's so many things to think about. Like, I was like, oh, well, why not just put them next door to each other? And then you don't have to pay for shipping from one to the other and call it a day. But yeah, I mean, I said I wasn't going to ask you another question, but I did. So I'm sorry about that. You opened it up. So just kind of in closing, tell us, like, I have a geek question, and that'll be, just I'm sure this is not what a lot of people are doing, but I'm just curious as like we move towards the future, this whole product personalization and, having like designer supplements or designer boxes and stuff like that. How do you manage, like, what are maybe one or two final thoughts on having these, like, where there's a lot of items or personalization that occurs? Like, how do you manage that? Like, what are your best practices there?
Oh, wow. So yeah, it's definitely on the forefront. There are a number of companies that are doing it today. Standardizing processes makes them scale better. So I know that sounds like it almost sounds contradictory to what you said, which is there's sort of this volume variety trade-off. If you're going to personalize, then how do you standardize? Well, you can personalize in a couple of standard ways, and that's what I would actually recommend. So find ways to characterize your customers so that you can treat them in a consistent way. And so in the case of personalized supplements, there are a couple of companies in the space that are actually engaging with the customer to plan. There's one that does an analysis of your blood, and they build a package based on feedback that comes back from their blood analysis. And then you'll get a custom setup. So for fulfillment to handle that, they have a pick and pack process already. But for fulfillment to handle that most efficiently, if you know that this person is going to be ordering exactly the same thing for a repeated period of time, then you can do pre-packs. And if you see a variety of, so let's say, for example, you were customizing in the US, about, I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's a significant number of US males are vitamin D deficient. It's even more up here in Canada because we don't get the sunshine. So if you know that everyone's going to pack that, you can actually structure your, and you know that everyone's going to have vitamin D based on everyone's blood work coming back that way, then you can make sure in the fulfillment house that A, you have a large stock of vitamin D, B, that it's really close to your preparation area because you want least energy to go and pull that out and stick it in your whatever. C, you can actually pre-package it. So rather than having the empty box, have the box machine actually just drop that straight into the box so that when you're actually doing your pick and pack, if you know that vitamin D is going to be there 90% of the time, actually make it a removal as opposed to a put in. These are some types of things that I'm seeing already occur in a variety of different ways. And we've done that for a while. Stick letters, right? Whale letters or letters of thank you to large customers. Right. It's following suit. We're just going to integrate even more sources of data on which to customize products for customers moving forward.
It's a wacky world, Malcolm. I have to say there's so many considerations that I never even thought of until like we connected and we started talking. I was like, I don't know, you just take something, put it in a box, ship it out, done. Okay. But it's not. There's the huge logistics, and I'm going to invite everybody in our audience to, send me any questions or anything that you have for Malcolm about fulfillment. This guy knows what's up. You can contact Malcolm directly. I'll put his information in the show notes, his website and all that stuff. And then lastly, Malcolm, I know that you work in shipping, fulfillment and all that, but what are some other cool areas that you've helped in the past, other than, being a merchant account whiz, fulfillment whiz, inventory whiz? What else do you do?
I've been very fortunate to have a lot of good coaching from a variety of different people who are great in the industry. And you can kind of think of me like a Lego brick. I know it sounds like a weird analogy, but if you have a hole inside your organization, I've had the good fortune to be exposed to a variety of things, basically the entire business. I look at the business as a system and I can slot in and narrow down to solve a particular individual problem, or end up being sort of a project management or a launch manager or things like that. I've had opportunities across the board. So I just like talking to people, and if I can help them, I'll give them a hand.
Well, I have to say that when I don't know something, you are on my roster of people asking, no matter what it is. I'm like, I think Malcolm will know this. I just have him on Skype. I'm like, hey, Malcolm, how do you do this? And I do find that you're a wealth of information, Malcolm, and you always give me at least an idea of where I should start looking for something or a tip or something that could get me started. So you're like a little mini personalized DR Google. Google Malcolm and he'll tell you what you need to know. So thank you so much, Malcolm. This was super informative. Obviously, we kind of just went over things very, very quickly, and we can dive in more. So if anybody's listening and has some specific questions or conundrums about their fulfillment or their inventory and whatever, I'm happy to have Malcolm back, answer all this stuff, and even answer your questions directly. So thanks again, Malcolm. Have yourself a great day, and we'll be talking soon.
Right back at you. Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hope you found today's session valuable. If you have any questions for me or just want to connect, please feel free to visit my website, mariasparagas.com. That's mariasparagis.com. I'd love to hear what you're working on, so drop me a line on any hot button issues your business is experiencing. And remember, don't worry about failure. You only have to be right once.